strike rate's very, very overrated.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Strike Rate, the cricket analytics podcast, where we're going through all of the key batting metrics and a bunch that you don't see on ESPN Cricket Info as well. I think we're about to get into some of the more technical ones now. So we took an impromptu break. Just a reminder, if you're liking the discussion, to find us, well, to like and subscribe. Obviously, get your phone out your pocket now. Make sure you do that. Help us grow the audience. And if you know other people that you think would like this podcast as well, tell them. Word of mouth is the best way to pass on a podcast, the most effective way. So do that. Let people know. Post it on Reddit or something. Dan, non-boundary strike rate. We were about to get into this conversation, and now we are. What is non-boundary strike rate? Is it useful?
Yeah, it's hugely useful. So I think probably the closest comparison in a sport like baseball would be like the running between bases, how good a player is at running between bases. And in cricket, I think that the non-boundary strike rate is more useful than the dot percentage, because the dot percentage doesn't tell you how good a player is at converting ones into twos. It's just whether they score off or score or don't score off a given ball. Now, with non-boundary strike rate, I want to say something and get something off my chest to start with. Now, actually, and I'm sure you would agree with this, Jack. You see quite a few sort of analysts or panelists using this metric now on social media in charts and stuff like that. And I'm just going to have a shameless plug for myself here. I actually invented this metric, and that's not some like random claim. I invented this metric because I couldn't get dot ball information accurately for certain leagues. So you can work out the non-boundary strike rate if you've got 4 and 6 data. So I used it as a workaround to effectively get something broadly similar to a dot percentage, but then found something which is actually even more useful than a dot percentage in the end.
Yeah. So tell us how it's useful.
Okay, so it shows you the runs per 100 balls of strike rate for a player if you take boundaries out of their scoring. So all the boundary balls disappear from their records. So, Jack, you've got benchmarks. I look at anything over 70 for a player as pretty good. Anything over 80 is like super elite. And then you've got a few guys sort of in the low 50s or even high 40s. I think guys like Chris Gale and Sunil Narayan were sort of in those ballpark areas as well. Broadly over the last few years, very, very low. So it shows you like the willingness to produce non-boundary runs compared to boundary runs for a player. And again, that helps you formulate strategies for a particular player if you're working with a team, for example.
Yeah, so your baselines that you threw out there are pretty much spot on. Top 10% would be 75.5, so a super elite over 80. Yeah, and anything below 60 gets you into the bottom 25%. So some of the like, can you guess? One guess who has the lowest non-boundary strike rate? 35.87.
I guess in Orion.
No, it's Rakeem Cornwall, of course.
Yeah.
Like, although, and this is where this can be, this is where I would say you don't want to get too carried away with this metric. His strike rate overall is 153, so he's mashing when it comes to boundaries. He's just not doing any running in between those boundaries. And there's a few other guys down there. I mean, I think you said Chris Gale. Narayan is right down the bottom as well, in the mid 40s.
Just to clarify as well for the listeners as well, because there's more fielders in the ring in the power play. Generally, top order batters or batters who face a high percentage of their balls in the power play do have a lower non-boundary strike rate than batters who bat in the non-power play overs. So if you're looking at benchmarks, it might be actually important to almost have like a benchmark for a power play batter, predominantly power play batter, and a non-power play batter as well.
Yeah, and that dynamic is actually borne out when you look at who's at the top. Benny Howell is one of the players right near the top, and he probably hasn't faced a ball in the power play in his life.
Would have batted a bit for Gloss, but on the whole, yeah. He's more of like a finisher,
Heinrich Klaassen again up near the top, doesn't bat in the power play all that often, although there might be a few power play balls in there at some point. One thing I found, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this. So I was looking at IPL stats year to year, and I was looking at what stats are good at predicting strike rate in the future, using a little bit of regression analysis. And what I found with non-boundary strike rate is that it actually was marginally indicative of a lower strike rate in future seasons. So having a high non-boundary strike rate wasn't actually a very good predictor that the player would have a high strike rate overall, which is obviously more important in the future. So maybe one of those stats that's it's not all that important to be good at. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it is important, but you're right, because non-boundary runs are worth significantly less than boundary runs. The boundaries have more impact on strike rate. So just to throw some numbers out there are very, very few batters worldwide who can strike at over 140 overall when they don't hit more than 16% boundaries. So because boundary hitting is such a huge driver of strike rate, the two things are mutually exclusive virtually. There might be one or two players, like Sam Hain, I think might be one that stood out a little bit in terms of being a below average boundary, but still above average for strike rate. There's not many of them. And this is a key understanding of that the boundaries drive strike rate, but non-boundary strike rate is still can be important, because if you're not hitting boundaries and you're not running between the wickets, then that tells its own story and explains what's scoring at about 100 strike rate. Whereas the players who are good at production of both boundaries and non-boundary strikes, throw Klaassen into the mix again. I'm sure he ranks really, really highly for that. Would mean he's a complete player, right? So that's how I would look at it. So you've got high boundary percentage, low non-boundary strike rates, boundary or dot dynamic. You've got the rotators who like run at high 70s, low 80s non-boundary strike rate, but hit 10, 12, 13, 14% boundaries. And then you've got the complete player who can do both. And that's, again, that Arsenal would stand out currently over the last year or two. AB de Villiers was also one who did that when he played as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about boundary percentage then. We'll break that down afterwards into 4s and 6s. So if non-boundary strike rate is telling you the non-boundary runs, boundary percentage is the go-to stat for boundary runs. Do you want to explain really briefly what that is? Because this is a stat where sometimes you see it presented incorrectly, I think, on TV broadcasts.
It's like my biggest pet hate when watching a game on TV, when someone puts like a stat on the screen of like boundary percentage of 70%. No, that's not boundary percentage. That is percentage of runs scored as boundaries. That is not the same thing. And I'll die on this hill. I really will. Like, seriously, no. Boundary percentage is the percentage of your ball space that you hit for boundaries. It's really simple. Ballpark benchmark would be like 1 in 6 balls, about 16-17% would be about average-ish. Depends on the league. A bit lower in Big Bash, a bit higher in a Blast. But that's an important metric, like I said, because if you hit under 16%, you're pretty much guaranteed not to strike at over 140 overall, because there's such close correlation between boundary percentage and strike rate. It's a hugely important metric because ballpark, again, it might vary very slightly between league to league, But on the whole, about 85% of T20 matches are won by the team who scored a higher percentage of boundaries in that match. So recruiting players who help you achieve that objective makes sense, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It seems well, it seems like a no-brainer. If you want the baselines, Dan, you basically has already said what the averages are. If you want it really specifically, 17.5 is the mean benchmark, but only 41% of players are achieving that. So the median, 16.8, is the median. That's the 50% mark in terms of the player pool.
Almost identical to 1 in 6 balls, right?
Yeah, exactly. An elite player will to be in the top 10%, 21.3, and then kind of replacement level, bottom 25%, 14.29.
Yeah.
That's quite a lot of players. I mean, that was 25% of players, obviously below that. And you've got to be doing something else, or you've got to have another skill to be rolling around with a
under 14%, not pretty.
Yeah. You want some player names? I think you can probably make some guesses as to who's near the top of this. Mohamed Harris again.
Russell's
up there. Yeah. Although Russell's an interesting one, and we'll get to this when we get to 6%, because how he makes up his boundary percentage is kind of unique. Will Jacks, obviously, we've mentioned his name a few times. Rossington is third. It's very similar.
Actually, he's great at running between the wickets. So that makes sense. Yeah.
Raheem Cornwall, we mentioned how low his non-boundary strike rate was, so he's hitting 1 in 4 balls for 4 or 6, which is really good. Surya Kumar Yadav in the mix too. Glenn Maxwell. There's a bunch of guys that are the Rolls Royces of T20 cricket, basically. Mohamed Harris, 27% of balls to the boundary.
Wow.
Not playing for Pakistan. Not Pakistan's first name on the team sheet. It's kind of beyond belief. What did we say the average was? 16.85. That puts you at halfway down. Glenn Phillips, Sai Siddharthan, Josh Inglis, MS Dhoni in that bracket there.
Josh Inglis having that figure roughly is actually not too bad, because Big Bash is low boundary percentage league.
Yeah, and this is where you always want to consider the player's role and things like that in this as well. We can break it down a little bit further, and we can do 6%, which is the same thing. We'll do 4% first, which is the same thing, but the percentage of balls that get hit for 4. This is where role, I think, really becomes a big factor. Is that statement correct, Dan?
Yeah, definitely, because you're probably not going to be like a number 3 or 4 batsman, but in the middle order, in the middle overs as well, looking to smack sixes straight away or for a chunk of your innings. Whereas players who I would imagine rank really, really highly on this metric, someone like Andre Russell, Rinku Singh, Tim David, for example, as well. They're more in that sort of later innings finisher role rather than looking to construct an innings in a more conventional way.
Yeah, so if you look at the two sort of side by side, when it comes to 4s, the top 5 are a completely different set of players.
Yeah,
the top 5 in
more openness, 4 sitting, right?
Exactly. So we've got Yashasvi Jaiswal, Prithvi Shaw, Usman Khawaja, actually, relatively small sample size, but hitting quite a lot of 4s. Adam Rossington again, Hazratullah Zazai, Surya Kumar Yadav, not an opener, but plays lots of shots, doesn't he? So I guess that's how he's accessing the boundary. And then on the 6s side, Andre Russell, Cornwall, Heinrich Klaasen are the 3 guys that are very good. A few other notable names. Nicholas Pooran is up there. If you want to know what good is for both, and I'll just do what the elite percentage is. If you're hitting more than 14.6% of your balls for 4, then you're an elite 4 hitter. And if you're hitting more than 8.8% of your balls for 6, then you're an elite. You're an elite 6 hitter. So that gives you a flavour of that. Dan, I think we've got through pretty much everything we were going to get through. I don't think there's much else to say. Obviously, if you're on ESPN Cricket Info, you have to do the maths on fours and sixes and boundary percentage, but the raw numbers are there. They just count fours and sixes, which are relatively limited in terms of what they'll tell you about a player. But you can work that one out.
The other thing I'll say as well is that you can look at, if you really want to nerd out into some statistics off your own back, you can look at stuff like 6 versus 4 ratios and stuff like that. So I think you mentioned earlier, Jeff, about Andre Russell's 6 hitting prowess. So last time I checked, there was like no more than 15, probably 10-ish players in the world who hit a higher percentage of sixes than they do fours. And he was definitely around the top, if not top. And so if you say, like, you divide the number of sixes hit by the number of fours hit, if your ratio is if that's above 1, you are very, very six dominant. And I'm guessing Russell ranks really, really highly for that. If you're below like 0.3, 0.25, 0.2, you are very, very four oriented. So you're not looking to clear the ropes on a regular basis.
Yeah, Andre Russell is in a league of his own when it comes to that. He is 14% of the balls for 6 and less than 10% of the balls for 4, which actually, I mean, it's ridiculous. There's nobody else even close. Everyone else, even if they do have a higher 6 percentage, it's like 1% higher. He's
it's like 1.4 ratio, which is nuts.
He's a freak. The guy is an absolute freak. I think we'll do a second show on this, and we'll talk about some more advanced stuff, and maybe we'll do some phase-based conversations as well, because we've only talked really general here in terms of the raw stats that are kind of available to you, and trying to give you an idea of what good and bad and average looks like there. But all of these things, to analyze a player properly, you kind of need to apply it to the role that they're playing and the phase that they're batting in. So probably a whole extra show on that. As we said, we want to take a load of questions as well, and I'm sure there will be quite a few. So do find us on Twitter. I'm at JackHope0 and Dan is at SAAdvantage, and get in touch when we post the shows up. Been a long one this, Dan, and we were aiming for 45-minute episodes. We've accidentally done an hour and a quarter, but it's there's a lot of stuff to talk about, and I think it's a really interesting topic. Any final words from you?
Yeah, I think the fact that we've managed to talk about this for well over an hour when we were planning to do 3/4 of an hour just illustrates really how much there is to chat about statistical metrics and the weight and the value that you can use in terms of predictive stuff into the future from certain metrics. And like I say, we haven't really got on to like really anything like super advanced yet. So it shows you how broad this particular topic is, and I think probably also illustrates how basic a lot of the media coverage is.
Yeah. I mean, like another thing we haven't talked about at all is the type of bowler that any of these players are facing, which is massively influential on everything that we've talked about, and where the ball is bouncing. So there's the stuff that you can find quickly on the internet barely scratches the surface when it comes to actually looking at player value. Anyway, Dan, been a pleasure as always, and thanks so much to everyone who has listened. Really excited to get this show out and launched. And yeah, cheers for tuning in. So goodbye.